All right, ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, today is Monday, October 19th, 2015, and this is episode 136 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, Jerry. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you survived.
By the skin of my teeth.
I hear you. Sorry we're late, guys. Yesterday was a busy day for both of us.
Indeed.
And we'll issue some refunds for the late show.
That's right. Discounts. So just before we get started, the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employer. So with that, anything you wanted to cover first?
No, we can jump into stories.
All right. Good deal.
I will say that the concept we were talking about, I guess I just lied to you. I do have something to say. The concept we were talking about at the end of last show about having personality style focused InfoSec awareness training got some interesting traction on the Twitters. So I will tell you, it's really easy to come up with ideas, and it's really, 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 really hard to actually execute on them because that takes work and effort.
We got some emails too that I have to forward you.
Calling me an idiot? Yeah.
No, actually, pretty interested. So,
yeah. Well, send them along, and I'll take a look.
Absolutely. All right, so we have a couple stories tonight. It was, I'd say, it was an interesting news week, in other than Flash hell, there wasn't an incredible amount of breach news, I guess I'd say.
I will tell you, though, on the Flash thing, just for a moment, in general, most organizations test patches before they deploy them, but I'm almost getting to a point where I want to start figuring out what type of security patches can be pushed without testing, which is a little risky, right? But there's a time delay in testing, which is also risky when we're seeing 0 days floating around and, emergency patches and such from vendors. I'm wondering from an enterprise vulnerability management maturity standpoint, if should you treat all patches as equal, or should you start saying, certain patches, certainly need to go through a test group and go through user acceptance training and all that jazz, and other patches are like, just push it blind, push the damn thing and see what happens. And deal with any breakage as a result.
I suspect that there probably is some, and I would just say anecdotally, it seems like Flash is probably one patch where it wouldn't make sense to spend a lot of investment in testing time, but something like Java, which I realize Java has kind of fallen out of favor by the wayside, but back in the heyday of Java, if you didn't test your apps on Java, that was kind of perilous because there's always some incompatibility. Microsoft kind of ebbs and flows with their updates, and for a long time they were very reliable. And as of late, you probably want to test those patches. So that's a tough nut.
Yeah, they recalled like 3 patches in the last year. Microsoft did, and reissued. Right. So that's a scary, sort of thing to just trust them blindly.
Absolutely. Having said that, I do wonder if. Now I know that there's lots of controversy about is Flash. Flash is baked into Chrome now, and it's actually baked into, I guess, IE and Edge. But kind of putting that to the side for a second, I wonder, Brian Krebs wrote an article, I guess, earlier this year about life without Flash. And I do wonder if kind of like we've started to shun Java, if it might be time for Flash too.
Maybe a lot of the functionality in Flash is built into HTML5, which may also have similar security issues. I will tell you, I can think of 3 or 4 security appliances or software or whatnot, information security centric applications in my enterprise environment that require Flash for me to access and operate. So I do think probably it's gotten to a point where you shouldn't just issue Flash to everybody, and maybe you need to start asking why do you need Flash and justifying it as part of a approved software build.
And probably also limiting Flash, the execution of Flash, to the specific use cases. Like you said, if you have some specific internal security apps, limit it to those.
Yeah, if you can.
If you can, yeah.
Yeah, plus click to activate and all that jazz. But I don't know. It's a tough one. I feel that, yes, Flash is a big problem. And yes, it's probably something that can go. But if I'm being pessimistic, I think there's always going to be something that is going to be in that category.
Yeah, well, I asked that question on Twitter over the weekend. If I became, god of the cybers and I banished Flash from from everybody's computer, would that actually change anything? And, I think in the short term, maybe, but in the long term, probably not. Something else would take its place.
Yeah, we'll see. And then some folks are advocating don't bother, just wrap Flash or your browser in a micro VM or some sort of sandboxing, and make sure that it who cares if it gets popped, kind of thing. And there's something to be said for that. But again, it's always going to be an arms race.
Yeah, I mean there's some definite usability issues with that, especially for the kind of rank and file person.
Yeah,
that's the. I think if somebody could figure out a really well refined and easily usable solution for that, I think that would be a. There you go. There's somebody listening. There you go. That's how you can make your fortune.
Right, because that's easy. Just no problem. Have it done by Tuesday.
I didn't say it was easy.
I will tell you, though, every time something like this comes up, I see the smattering of tweets from vendors going, "Oh, we would have protected against that."
That's right. We detected this. You were protected 8 months ago.
But this isn't what you want to talk about.
Nope. So we do have some stories. The first of which comes from Threat Connect, and this is a blog post by a gentleman named Wade Baker who used to work with Verizon on the data breach investigation report. And one thing I'll say is, damn, this is a long post. And I'm not intending to go through all of it. However, I thought it was exceedingly interesting. The data nerd in me and the risk nerd in me kind of collided on this particular post. And, this kind of goes back to some discussions I've had with people about, how do you, from a more pure risk approach, how do you get the kinds of data that you need in order to be able to figure out how you properly prioritize things? And so what this blog post is about is taking threat intelligence feeds and mapping it into something like FAIR, which is an actual what I'll call proper risk management framework, and then using the frequencies that come out of that threat intelligence feed to inform your risk management program, so you can see more objectively, rather than, as he says, rather than getting a bunch of people in a conference room and arguing about whether a yellow risk times a yellow, I should say a yellow likelihood versus a yellow vulnerability is a orange or a yellow impact. That's not a productive thing.
But that's how we do it. It
is how we do it.
I don't understand. That's exactly what we do. I thought that's how it was done.
It is how it's done, and it's how it's taught, and it's completely wrong.
You're blowing my mind tonight, man. Just boom.
Completely wrong. So anyway, this is something that I know it's not in the normal context of things we talk about. However, every now and then I like to expose the audience to something new, and well, yeah.
It's your show, man. Get crazy.
There you go. So if you're at all interested in this, I would encourage you to read it. I will tell you that every now and then I get an email or someone on Twitter hits me up about this. How do I justify my investment in whatever to management? And if when you start going down that road, this is where you end up. And because
what do you mean by this is where you end up?
This what's described in this article, right? The FAIR type of assessment. FAIR is like I said, it's an actual, real what I'll call adult risk assessment process.
Can you give us the 20-second elevator speech of what FAIR is for those who've never heard of it?
I believe it stands for Factor Analysis in Information Risk.
Right.
And it's I shot from the hip there. I was unprompted. Pretty good. Even for as old as I am, it's not bad. So anyway.
And you've got a bad hip, so I wouldn't be shooting from it.
True enough.
Liable to break that thing.
True enough. So anyway, the whole idea behind FAIR is that you are using actual mathematical methods to calculate risks, right? So half of FAIR, what I would call half of FAIR, is split up into this ontology of how to break down risks into likelihoods and impacts, and which sounds a lot like what we do in what the way the more immature.
Yeah, so far it sounds like every other risk analysis framework I've dealt with.
Right, but that kind of decomposes down to the point where you are actually plugging in real numbers in terms of the frequency of exposure, the frequency of attack, and kind of across a whole bunch of different factors. And by the way, none of this is like revolutionary. It's when you actually go through it, it makes a ton of sense. However, it is much more structured, and I'm not going to say rigid, but it takes out the guesswork, right? So the main issue, and the best way I can describe FAIR is to contrast it from what it competes with. What it competes with is basically getting a bunch of people in a room and brainstorming about, well, what are the threats? How likely do we think they are, and how much do we think that each of them are going to, the impacts would cost? And then we multiply one side by the other side, and then we figure out, well, okay, what's our prioritization? And this is a bit different approach because you're kind of going systematically through a bunch of different domains, and you are asking, you're not guessing. You are trying to find objective data that represents each of these elements.
Clear as mud. Fine explanation. I am
sorry. the book on FAIR is like 1,000 pages long.
So what we're really saying, or what you're really saying, if I could paraphrase, is that this tries to take a more pragmatic, science-based approach as opposed to a anecdotal, gut-based approach.
That's exactly what it is.
Cool. So people should look into FAIR.
Yeah, there are certifications for FAIR.
Mm.
And
can I put it on my business card?
With your SSP.
That's right.
Yes. I don't know.
Well, if I can't, then I don't understand.
What's it worth, right?
Seriously.
But I do, I do think that, and I've said this in the past. I do think that as time goes on, organizations are going to demand a much more accurate accounting of risks, and a much more accurate investment or objective way of investing in IT security. And there may be better ways, right? I mean, the one thing I've learned is that, a lot of things aren't perfect, but is it better than everything else you've got, right? And that's, I think, where FAIR fits in. It's not perfect, but it is a better approach than just about anything we have today. Certainly better than the conference room brainstorming.
Fair enough. No pun intended.
No pun intended. Nice. All right. So our next story comes from the Register, and the title is "Inside Mandiant's Biggest Forensic Breach Battle. Is This Anthem?" Holy cow! So this is a tale of intrigue and mystery.
Warning: possible subliminal marketing ahead.
Yes. I mean, clearly, Mandiant is. They definitely come out of this looking really good, don't they?
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, I kept looking for the phrase "couldn't possibly be defended against," and clearly nation state.
It wasn't there. I assume they ran out of space in the article because it clearly would have been there.
I thought it was a press release. Okay, carry on.
Kind of.
No, okay, all right. I'll stop ripping on Mandiant now, and they will obviously never be a sponsor either. So this is Mandiant talking about an 8-month engagement where they were basically fighting to get some malicious hackers out of an environment.
Yeah, and it was kind of a tit for tat, as they describe it, engagement with an adversary who had compromised more than 1,000 endpoints with malware, and apparently what they say in here is that they ran their standard playbook for the eviction. And just by the way, eviction is the lovely process where you work to figure out all of the places that your adversary is in and all the ways they get in, and all at once you close them all down simultaneously, so that they're out for good. Because otherwise, if you don't have an understanding of all the places and ways they're coming in, you can clean up part of the environment and they're just back. And this is apparently what happened here. And part of me says, well, if that happened, their eviction process probably wasn't as good as maybe they thought it was.
Well, they made a couple of kind of insinuations in the article that their normal playbook, gasp, didn't work this time for some reason.
That's right.
Because they were just that good.
That's right.
Now, they may be that good, but it tells you something interesting, that Mandiant has a playbook, which is somewhat to be expected. Not everything is you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you walk into an organization. There are some best practices that you can adopt and execute on. But, their point is that stuff didn't work. These guys were smarter than that. They were better than that.
Yeah. And I think the thing I suspect most of our listeners aren't going to anytime soon have to deal with an adversary at that level. However, if you read this article, you can really start to get an idea of the different key processes that go into responding to a more substantial kind of an attack. And so I think that's a very valuable thing. So they talk about things like, and we've talked about in the past, like having an external or separate means of communication, right? Because, if you have this kind of an active adversary who is in your environment, they know that they're there, and you're having this bit of an arms race. You don't know what they're monitoring. They might be monitoring email. They might be monitoring. They could be listening in on the stupid microphones on laptops. Who knows? So you have to keep all of that in mind. Again, most people probably don't have this advanced of an adversary to deal with. However, these are things to think about, right? And then the concept of the eviction is an important concept because not all malware is, CryptoLocker, right? There's if if you are unfortunate enough to fall victim to some, I'm not going to call it nation state, but more advanced than CryptoLocker, you're going to end up having to do something like that. You're going to end up having to plot an eviction and kind of be methodical about it. So,
yeah, there's some interesting stats in this article too. More than 1,000 endpoints were compromised. Some 7,000 MD5 hashes were assigned to the constantly changing malware. So that means that they're constantly rolling new malware and randomizing the malware, so signatures can't easily pick it up. Each compromised box had its own unique command and control server that was hosted almost exclusively on hacked third-party sites.
That one was really interesting to me because it's very common in an incident response situation or active incident situation that you want to look for common things, right? You have this big network. And you are basically assuming that anything is potentially compromised. So I want to figure out, how do I figure out what's potentially compromised? Well, I look at the behavior of a known compromised system, and I start to look for those attributes in other systems, like what systems is it talking to on the internet, and what files does it have? What file hashes does it have, and different attributes like that. And when you have a situation like this, what they're saying here, which is, really critically important, and I'm sure just was a total pain in the ass for these guys, if each one of those systems is contacting a different command and control host, potentially in a different, that doesn't say it right, but if I were going to do it, right, different port too, or different protocol, there's nothing common, right?
Right. IOCs aren't working.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is interesting. So just a little background too. Apparently this was a prezo given at the Cyber Defense Summit.
Yes.
So that I'm not sure if that slide deck or video of it's out there, but it might be interesting to go watch it if it is.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find that. I did see in here somewhere. Oh yes. One of the, and this is really funny, I thought. First off, they had to, as they put it, the MIR, the Mandiant Incident Responder, became a digital doorstop because it was, and I think part of it was, again, going back to the...
Now, is that a doorstop to stop digital doors?
I don't. It's not very clear. It's kind of ambiguous.
Right, yeah. It's kind of an odd phrase that leaves one to wonder, especially OCD people like myself, exactly what was... Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So the other one was apparently a lot of, well, I don't know if it's a lot or some percentage of the malware being used was Python based, and so they got lucky by upgrading Python to 3.4, and I assume they were using like 2.6 or 2.7 before. And with that, they got some additional logging capability that they didn't have on the other version of Python, and so that apparently gave them some new clues. So I'm assuming that they started being able to to queue in, use some of those Python logs as incident or indicators of compromise themselves, which I assume.
Yeah. So what that tells me, if I'm reading between the lines here, is that the bad guys were deleting logs and had a handle on what logs to delete automatically. And when they went up to Python 3.4, new and different logs are being created that slipped through their grasp. So, one of the takeaways there is secure off-box logging is kind of handy, yes, at least for the beginning of a compromise.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And don't, by the way, this was something Bob told me. Do not have your logs, your separate log system, connected to the same Active Directory domain.
But administration, Jerry, ease of administration, rights management. Why are you trying to make admin's life difficult?
Because your adversary will get into that.
That never happens.
Box and will wipe the logs. I know.
Whatever. You security people just spreading fear.
It almost never happens.
So, by the way, I got to rip on this for a little bit. There's a quote here that just is one of those pithy quotes that means nothing and is completely unhelpful. So the article wraps with, and this is a quote from one of the presenters: "When you have nothing, you've got to turn their weaknesses into your strengths. You must match or exceed the attacker's pace, development, visibility, advanced techniques, and intensity."
And I assume by all that they mean hire Mandiant, right?
Seriously, what the hell am I going to do with that? I'm going to walk in. I'm going to walk into my CISO's office tomorrow and put that on the board and go, "There you go." And he's going to go, "Okay."
The only way you can do that is by hiring Mandiant.
Now, don't get me wrong. Mandiant's got some great people, and they're very well respected. PR issues with Sony aside, they're one of the better ones out there. If I had to hire an external, or not that I have, not that I would want to, but if somebody asked me who would you hire to do a, forensics investigation, I'd probably say Mandiant first.
Yeah, I agree. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to poke at them. So
yeah, marketers got to market. But in this case, I would like to go see the original Prizo. I bet there's a lot more in here that didn't quite maybe make it or got lost in translation as the Register was writing it up.
Probably so. So anyway, moving on to our next story, which also comes from the Register. The title is Dow Jones rubbishes claims Dow Jones rubbishes claims Russian hackers plundered its servers for insider trading tips.
Clearly, an Englishman wrote this article.
Yes.
Proper English there.
Yep. Hence my difficulty with it. So this was really interesting because last week, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, I don't remember the exact timing. There was breaking news all over the place about Russian hackers had been found stealing data from Dow, and it was the kind of data that was tradable, right? So, and it was big news. And then it was a couple hours later, Dow started putting out press releases saying, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about. There's no investigation."
Do you mean Dow's budget bait and dial-in shop? Because it ain't us.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I wonder how most organizations would react if this sort of thing happened. And the original story quoted like 4 different unnamed sources, and so I still have not seen closure yet on what the hell happened here. I do know that generally most reputable news sources will, if they're not going to cite a person, publicly cite a person, they'll go off and get several different corroborating anonymous sources, which appears to be what they did. I think they said there were 4, if I'm not mistaken. But apparently it's BS. Now, I know that after this story came out, there was a lot of discussion about, well, is Dow just hiding it or whatnot? And I'll tell you, having been on the corporate side of this, I don't think so, right? I think that the most you would have gotten out of Dow would be, we're investigating, or we are,
There's no current evidence of compromise.
Yeah, there's no evidence the data has been misused.
Right. Yeah, I agree. If they're going to go to the trouble of putting out this many denials, they got to be damn sure they're right most of the time. Now, there's no accepting for stupidity, but there's serious legal consequences if they get that wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And reputational and whatnot. But it's interesting because just the week before, we talked about it the week, I guess it was episode 135, Dow had leaked or lost like 3,500 credit cards, right? From their website.
Was it credit card or was it contact info? You might. I'm.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It's late on a Monday. My brain's starting to shut down. Some sort of information was taken for somebody somewhere at some time.
But it wasn't. It was clearly not being misused. There was no evidence of it being misused.
No. It was packaged up in a nice little package with a bow.
But I think they did offer credit monitoring, so
of course
there was that. Anyway, no credit monitoring in this case. Apparently, no breach. It is an interesting kind of tabletop exercise to think about what would happen if, your organization was suddenly named as, investigating a breach, and you're not. What would your reaction be?
So this is an interesting one. What do you think is really going on here? Do you think there's just some vicious rumor floating around, or something's really happening and Dow's being cagey, or what do you think?
I don't think Dow's being cagey. I'm not.
What if they got a national security alert that said they couldn't talk about
it? My guess is that they would refer questions to the FBI. I mean, honestly, I don't think they would deny. I don't think they would issue a denial. I think they would do a deflection or something. I mean, this is very vehement and it just doesn't smack of something as them actually investigating. Now there is a possibility that that's not been explored yet, as far as I'm aware, and that is that the sources were in law enforcement, and Dow isn't actually aware of it yet.
And it leaked to the press before it's really been officially delivered to Dow.
Yeah.
Ugh. Well, you would think by now that would have been cleared up.
Yeah. So here's just a little story that Bob told me once. So Bob was telling me, and this was not all that long ago, that the FBI contacted his organization and told him. It wasn't him, right? But told his organization that they had detected some significantly concerning activity involving some IP addresses belonging to Bob's company. And, the nudge, wink, wink was, it was some kind of government APT, whatever acronym you want to throw in there. And so they went and looked, and, those IPs had been null routed for like 3 years.
So somebody had absconded with the AS?
Had been banging around in the FBI for 3 years. So,
the wheels of justice turn slowly.
So, I don't know that this is like fourth-hand information, right? But anyway, I think it's not impossible to think that it just hadn't gotten to Dow yet. I mean, my only reservation is that Dow, there is something going on. It's just that Dow doesn't know about it yet.
You gotta think though that Dow is considered critical financial infrastructure and should have a speed dial to somebody in authority in one of these organizations. And
I would have hoped that before they issued a reply to this, that somebody, because like you said, I'm sure that somebody in Dow knows somebody in the FBI and can call them up and say, "What the hell?" And I can only assume that the FBI contacted, "Don't know what you're talking about." But even that, FBI's a big place. Who knows?
So, to be continued.
To be continued. It's so interesting to me, especially given what happened the week before. And anyway, we'll see. I'm very interested. So our last story for tonight comes from nextgov.com, and the title is OPM to fully do away with passwords for network access in 2 years. Yeah. So
it's good to have a plan, though.
It is good to have a plan, although it's a little depressing, right? So,
and technically, it's a misleading headline, by the way. They're not getting rid of passwords. They're going to two-factor.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's right. So the news here is that by the end of the fiscal year 2017, OPM will enforce multi-factor authentication for 100% of its PIV, which are the smart card enabled users, along with some sort of two-step verification for 80% of users who do not have PIV cards. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, okay, the allegation of the OPM breach is that it was some contractor's access that was hijacked, right? And I would assume, maybe incorrectly, don't know, that it's those external parties who don't have the PIV cards. And so what they're saying is that in 2017, they're only going to have 80% of those people covered with multi-factor. So, it's just still not an airtight thing. Anyway, the reason I wanted to include this one is, obviously, two factors of an important thing. It's hard to deny. I do think that from their perspective, they had all of their employees required smart cards, right? But again, you got to know where it's not there.
Clearly not being effectively used.
Well, but it was absent for a significant portion of the people who come into your business.
Whatever, man. They passed that checkbox on that compliance thing. That audit was completely satisfied. I don't understand what your problem
You're a
is.
jerk.
I am telling you the reality on the ground. It's sad but true.
Oh, I know.
But to be fair, hindsight is always 20/20. And it's a difficult thing to project. How are you going to have your company completely screwed?
Well, I know, but here's the thing that is, I guess, frustrating or concerning, and I think also the lesson, right? So there's a sentence in here: while mandated to control network access with digital smart cards since 2004.
So that mandate clearly didn't have much teeth.
Only 1% of OPM computer users needed something more than a password to sign on as of September 2014. Yeah. But then they do go on to say that as of today, all employees need smart card for network access. Now, I don't know if there's like different, I'm not sure how much wordsmithing is going on in there, but the thing that concerns me is it seems like they're, to me, and this could be just, me misreading the situation, but it's like a situation where they are interpreting the requirement that your employees need to have, smart card access, and well, they didn't say contractors. They didn't say everybody. They just said employees. So we got that box checked. And, all those other people, they can continue to use passwords. And I guess my point is, think holistically, right? If you're talking about some really important control like this, think holistically. It blows my mind to think that someone somewhere thought it made sense to apply that to employees and not to contractors.
Well, maybe it was a cost thing. Maybe it was a planned rollout. Maybe. I mean, you could be right. I could be overly critical. Who knows? Maybe it was in the contract between OPM and the contracting organization. I mean, there's so many crazy things that come into play. There could have been some VP who runs the contractors screaming their head off saying, no, we're not going to do this. This inhibits our ability to get our job done.
Yeah, that's true.
But, I'm still hung up on the fact that they were mandated, quote unquote, in 2004 and never got that done, more than 1% of the organization. Which tells me a whole lot. That tells me that there's not much teeth behind those audits. So it makes you wonder what else they're ignoring.
Well, I think if memory serves, and it's been a while since all this went on, but I think the Inspector General had been going in and auditing OPM for a long time and turning up unsatisfactory results.
But to no effect.
Exactly. That's the key. It's not like they were hiding it. And so, yeah,
there was no accountability. It clearly was not important, basically, to Congress, who...
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not trying to get political here, but in theory, Congress is the management, the board of directors of OPM.
Exactly.
So it comes back in many ways to leadership and leadership priorities.
That's exactly my thinking too. Yep. So the reason I wanted to bring this up, obviously, this thing we continue to learn the new depths of depravity regarding the OPM breach and what's been going on a weekly basis. But the thing that, just setting the politics and everything aside, the thing that strikes me, and I see this a lot, is that people get really pedantic in their interpretation of policy requirements, and they lose the context of why they're trying to, why they're doing the thing they're doing. And
because who's measuring them and who is holding them accountable? Typically auditors.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And to be fair as I can to auditors, typically they don't understand the technical nuance well enough to know the spirit of the audit.
That's very true.
I see this all the time where, the metrics around patching is more important than what we're actually patching.
Right.
And
you lose the context of why you're patching, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to be careful about what I say here, but ultimately, yeah, you at some point need to have enough of a backbone to be able to keep the good intentions in mind. And if that means that you've got to take, some hits from the auditors, sometimes that's worth it to get the right things done to protect the company. But if all you're doing, and in this case with OPM, they weren't even caring what the auditors were saying, which is even worse.
Right.
But if you're, because we have gone more and more, especially in highly regulatory environments and in regulated environments, to compliance and to audits and mandates, and if that is all you're reacting to, you're probably really missing a lot of important things.
Yeah.
And I get it. It's tough, and boards and risk and control groups have got to find some way to measure the effectiveness of their security group and somehow give oversight. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you still have to be smart enough, or at least strong enough in your convictions to go, I understand this is what you're looking for, auditor. However, this is why we did it a different way, because of these good reasons to protect the company. Because at the end of the day, if you are completely compliant, but you fail to protect the company, what good has it done you?
Yeah.
But I see that over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, and I think part of this is, I know we're descending into hyperbole and philosophy, compliance philosophy here, but one of the things that's struck me is that non-compliance has become its own category of risk, right? That is independent from the risk of loss associated with the thing that the compliance regime is intending to avoid. And so, just the risk of being non-compliant, or the risk of failing an audit, or an examination, or whatever, is itself a risk.
So we abstracted away the original intention behind the audit.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And again, it's become its own thing, and which has to be managed like any other risk. Which I'm not saying that it makes sense. I'm just saying that that's making an observation of what I've seen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And to be clear, I'm not saying there shouldn't be third-party audits and whatnot. I do think there should be. I think that that's important. I think we can get very stuck in our own echo chamber in IT and have our own view of reality. And it's good to have a strong external third party come in and sanity check.
Right.
You still have to understand what the goal ultimately is with security, which is to keep the company as safe as leadership wants while still enabling business. And there are times those audits go sideways and become their own beast and don't support that role.
Right.
I could have said that much more elegantly. I'm sorry.
And sometimes you can manage that, and sometimes I think you can't. And I guess that's my point.
I agree. I mean, the only thing I would say is that there's a cost in resources, time, energy, and focus to deal with audits.
Yeah.
And so there's a value of diminishing returns for how many different audits you go through and deal with.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that is one thing that I see a lot is organizations chasing audit findings or chasing replies to audits or gathering information for audits as opposed to actually building high leverage long-term security wins. Yeah,
and that honestly is a challenge. That's a management challenge, especially as more of our industries, I guess, becomes regulated. That's going to become a much greater management challenge, and it is something that we've got to figure out how. And you've talked about this in the past, right? How do you continue focusing on proactive stuff while all of this, all of this reactive stuff is happening in the background? In the past it was more on getting out of the help desk ticket queue, right, and doing proactive things. But I think it's the same kind of situation with audit hell, and we've got to make sure that we don't get so tied up in that we lose the context of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, certainly. And there's also an aspect of that of timing. You may have an auditor come in and flag you on an issue that you have, and you have a plan to fix a very elegant, idealized plan that's going to take 6 months to a year, but the auditor demands you fix it in 2 months. And so you have to put in a less than ideal solution and Band-Aid it that you never circle back around to fix.
Right. Yep. There's no appetite or desire. Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes in that case, it may be worthwhile to tell the auditor, we understand, and we're going to take longer than you'd like to fix it, but we're going to fix it the right way. And that, because again, an auditor has a myopic view of their little slice of what's going on in the organization. It's not balanced against everything else.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So, anyhow, I think that'll do our show for this evening. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I apologize if I seem a little down today. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. I'm not my normal happy-go-lucky self.
It's been a long week already. Huh?
Well, no, it wasn't even necessarily work. It's just I'm just tired. I don't think I slept well. So sorry if I'm not as entertaining as I normally am. But
you're always entertaining.
That's what she said.
Anyhow, thank you for listening, everyone. And if you like the podcast, give us some love on iTunes. We definitely appreciate the I think now 87 people who have left us reviews. Thank you,
including one very entertaining sequel drop table attack, which I laughed a lot.
That was very awesome. Yes, I'm sure Apple did not find that very funny, but we did.
As far as we know, it worked too.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm teasing. But if it had, wouldn't that have been epic? Wouldn't that have been epic?
Oh, my goodness.
But yes, thank you very much for listening, guys. Thank you for the love on iTunes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you for all the Patreon donations as well.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you.
Awesome. It still humbles me and boggles my mind that you guys are willing to give money to us to listen to us ramble away every week. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. And you can find the links to the stories we've talked about tonight and all of our previous episodes on our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Khaled on Twitter at Lurg, me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. If you have any ideas, feedback, whatever, send an email to info@defensivesecurity.org. I'm a few weeks behind in responding. However, I will respond.
Do we need to do a listener mail episode coming up one of these days?
I think we do, yes. Absolutely. And I, by the way, I do really appreciate all the email that we get, especially like the Russian completely Cyrillic spam, bride, the Russian mail order bride things. Those are great.
Have you picked one yet? Are you still shopping?
My wife would not be happy about that.
Well, that's not what I asked. I asked if you picked one.
Shh. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. I do get a lot of spam on that, but thank you very much for your emails. And with that, we'll talk again next week. Take care.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, we're all stupid. We've never done this before.
So you're getting mansplained? Is that right?
Well, yeah.
You're on mute. Oh my God.
No, I was just testing you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.